Hello, everyone. My name's Tricia Edgar, and I'm a member of your Board of Trustees. And on the behalf of the board, I'd like to welcome all of you today. For those of you who are new, you'll notice that there were a couple people standing at the front door with sunflowers on their lapels, and they would especially like to welcome you today. There is coffee and an art show, art craft fair, after the service, and they will be there as well to welcome and talk with you about who we are and what we do. We're a community that shares values rather than a specific system or doctrine of beliefs. And as part of these values, we look to live our lives with greater depth, meaning, and purpose. And whoever you are, and wherever you come from, and whoever you love, we choose to welcome you into our caring community. Thank you for coming today.
I'm going to do the opening story. My name is Kerry Burke. I'm on the Sunday Services Committee. Once a month, the ministers are off. Today, we have a panel. And our topic is, as I put it in the calendar, what does it mean to be a successful man or woman? And really, what I mean is person. These days, it changes as you get older. You look at it one way when you're younger. It's sort of an interchange between your history, the way you were brought up, things that happen to you, things that happen over time. It's always a good time to figure out whether you can meet your own expectations. Being successful could be something at home. Being successful could be something at work, something with your family. Personally, I'm an expert in failure. I come by it honestly. I've got a bunch of learning disabilities, so my first 20 years at the bottom of every grade, 4 different schools, you get the idea that failure is an option, and it's not really going to change for you. Luckily, as I've gotten older, I have tasted the sweetness of success, and frankly, I prefer it to a steady diet. And that's why we have got this panel for you, a wonderful panel going to come up. My son Matt, who is currently, he's at the back. He's a soccer game. He's a soccer coach for his lovely daughter, my granddaughter, and he's going to make it today. And we will introduce our panel as we go along. Okay, we are starting with our panel. Sonia Wachowski is coming up.
She's up.
Yes, she is. Okay. And if I am very, very careful, I'm going to have a Burnaby liver with wife Carla, who is making us sound great over there, and sister to Mordred. She works as a school counselor in Coquitlam School Board, students from kindergarten to grade 5. Prior to school counseling, Sonia worked 12 years as a counselor in mental health and addictions with a master's degree in counseling from UBC. She coaches volleyball, chess club, helping with the coach of the Como Lake Relays, board member here, Elliott Institute, Burnaby Community Services, actively involved with summer camps, and as a dean at Minaramata, and the creative arts at Elliott in Seebeck. Sonia, thank you for coming.
Thanks. Before I start, I want to honor the fact that gender is not a binary construct. It's sort of fluid. And I was always that kid that was going to the girls' washroom and getting that question, are you a boy or are you a girl? And in those days, you kind of had to pick. So solidly in the girl camp. But I'm glad that we're living in an era now where we understand that it isn't one sort of or the other. So for me, success started out to be measured in terms of athletic achievement. My formative years were the 1970s, and the Montreal Summer Olympics were a key event that provided inspiration to a young athlete. Debbie Brill, a high jumper from BC, captured the bronze medal, and I was captivated by her achievement and the pursuit of excellence in competition, and my aspiration became to be an Olympian. Over a few years, the sport changed to volleyball, and I chased the dream into my 20s. Although I didn't quite make the Olympics, I did play for Canada at the World Championships, and I realized my dream of wearing a jacket with Canada on the back. More importantly, though, I learned an important lesson, that it is the journey, not the end result, that offers us the opportunity to learn and grow. As I transitioned into my adulthood, I felt strongly that I wanted to make a positive contribution to the world. Success to me was not defined by a certain income, achievement, or prestige. Rather, it was about using my gifts in service. I've done that through becoming a counselor, first in the field of addictions and mental health, and now working in schools. Fast forward a few years, being asked to speak at this sermon, I was reflecting on what success means to me, and I found this quote from a Mary Oliver poem. "When it's over, I want to say, all my life I was a bride married to amazement. I was a bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I have made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world." What I take from this poem is the challenge to say yes to things that scare me. Being a part of this panel, for example. Taking on the chair role of the personnel committee. Sometimes it means just showing up. Sometimes this means being willing to stand up for what I believe in. Ocean kayaking in the Kinder Morgan protest in May, even though I'd never ocean kayaked before. I'm not sure I recommend that. Recently, about a month or two ago, I was having a minor midlife crisis. I was ruminating on my age, I won't say what it is, and was having a bit of anxiety, questioning my progress towards a couple of goals I'd set for myself in my 30s, getting my PhD, writing a book. Feeling somewhat unsure about my progress toward these goals, I had been questioning whether I was a success in my life. Around this time, I learned my aunt was in the hospital for her final days. Sitting at my aunt's bedside for that week, what I came to understand was, again, a renewed understanding of what success is and what matters in the end. As I sat there holding her hand as she labored to breathe, I thought of all the hard work and caring those hands had offered to the many patients she cared for as a nurse. I had a major epiphany. I felt deeply that all that matters, the true meaning of success, is the love you offer the world. Love in kindness and respect of your words. Love in the patience you show when you're not feeling it. Love in the acceptance you offer to one and all, even when it's hard. So that's what I'm trying to measure my success by on a day-to-day basis. Only love matters. Thank you.
The next speaker is my son, Matt Burke. I was over at his place the other day talking about the panel and what we were going to be talking about, and he said, "Oh, I've been thinking about that." And I thought, perfect, look no further.
And also, I really can't say no to him.
Or he wouldn't get his allowance.
Of awesome socks.
Nice one. I've had a very different relationship with my children, with Matt and JJ, than my dad had with me. He had the old style, big job, 6 months on the road, and a tenuous relationship at times on the domestic front. I spent a lot of time at home, and it's been one of the things that I have felt very successful with. Matt, welcome.
Thanks, Daddy. Hey, how's it going? So I had been doing a lot of reflection about the nature of success in my life. I'm coming up to a 20-year high school graduation reunion. Good time for reflection. High school, not a happy place for me. I really, really hope that was the low point. And kind of leaving high school, had this sense of elation and freedom and channeled that into striving activity. and did all these really interesting work things and kind of began to identify as an athlete and started running marathons and started traveling and expanded my social networks and was just super busy with all kinds of really neat things. And I think if I had to use a word to define my feeling of success at the time, it was hustle. I was always hustling. Right down to, for a while, I was a full-time student and a full-time worker and was maybe getting 4 hours of sleep a night, but was doing some stuff. I mean, I couldn't stop the work from coming in as a young entrepreneur doing all kinds of stuff. And I think if I were to measure, if you were to say to my 24-year-old self, how do you measure success? How do you measure your success? I would have said, well, I've just been to these countries, and I just got this work award for this other thing, and I mean, I met like 15 new people last week, and I was just on a CD that got recorded, and it would be this list of activities. But with that strive, there was a big element of constant self-sacrifice that really interfered with my joy at the time. So I would never prioritize a hike on a Saturday, ever. Unless it was with a potential client or something like that. So I would have said, my 24-year-old self would have said, yeah, successful. I mean, look at this laundry list of stuff you've checked off your list. Amazing. But I had a major moment of transformation, and her name was Eliana Grace. And then 2 years later came Thomas Garrett, who's out there with some engineering game of some kind. And at first I tried to approach parenthood the same way as I would kind of all these other aspects of life. And I was pretty convinced that I could hustle 3 hours of parenting into 45 minutes. I'm sure just through sheer effort and focus, I could definitely densify my parenting so that I could go and keep focusing on these other things. And boy, was I wrong. You know, and I remember having these moments. It's like, I'm pretty sure I just spent an hour and a half trying to figure out the most efficient way to pack a diaper bag, and Eliana's in the other room by herself. Like, I got to reshape and refocus. And one of the things I'm always really committed to is, if there's a most important thing going on, you give it your all. So I took 6 months off work. I actually had to fight my employer for it, and took 6 months off. And through that process was completely transformed. And to this day, the greatest moments of joy for me are getting to play, catch in the pool with Tommy yesterday, or do math homework with Ellie, or decorate a box using duct tape. You know, this is like major moments of joy in everyday life. And my 24-year-old self definitely didn't have that. So what I started to kind of acknowledge is, I just can't push my way like a bull through life. I need to start to examine kind of these different things that are going on, some of which I'm not in complete control of. Work remained and remains incredibly important to me. I get a ton of self-identity around it. I love the fulfillment that it gives me every day. I love the fulfillment that it gives me 3 days out of 5, maybe 2 days out of 5. Anyway, I'm working on that. And this neat notion of kind of constant investment in family. And then things started to go a little bit wonky with wifey, who, of course, now there's this bunch of new relationships. So now that needs a whole bunch of extra focus. And I remember she's kind of complaining about being kind of tired and under-socialized. I'm like, well, you should totally prioritize that. And then, of course, the moment of mirror reflection that I should probably be prioritizing that as well. And so what sort of slowly unfolded over a couple of years was this new word for success. It's not strive anymore or hustle. Now it's balance. And it's work, and it's my kids, and my wife, and my athletic self, and my social life. That's very important to me. And so remains personal growth. Like, I always have to feel like I'm kind of doing something new. I'm working on something new. That's very, very important to me. That's not all perfect, of course. There's all kinds of other things I wish I had the hustle to go and fit in. There isn't enough nearly of a focus on social justice in my life. I coach the kids' sports, but I'm fighting with another of the coaches over something. I'm not proud of that, but I accept it. I nearly got fired last year for grossly misjudging an aspect of my company's bureaucracy. And I'm not getting nearly enough sleep. This is definitely an aspect. But I accept all that. I mean, I have no choice but to accept it. And that acceptance of letting things go, of agreeing with myself that I will allow certain things to fail on this path to balancing the 6 most important things in my life, has been the biggest transformation of the last 3 or 4 years. And it's led me to do some really amazing things. I just left a job at a company whose name you all know to take a job at a company that none of you know, and that was like a big self-identity step for me to accept that. But it was the right choice for my athletic self. It was the right choice for my social self, and most importantly, it was the right choice for my wife and my kids. And that's really neat, to have come through that process and to still feel really successful. So today, you might say, that 24-year-old self, you would measure yourself based on, this checklist of things. And you might say, well, how do you measure your success now? And I would answer it the same way I would answer it if any of you ran into me on the street 3 days out of 5 and said, how you doing today? And I'd say, I'm happy.
Our next speaker is Bob Vaughn. And for those of you who know Bob, it's a real surprise to see him up here. When I mentioned to Lynn Savrin, who was on the panel, when we got to Bob, her mouth actually dropped right open. Yeah, it was just like that. Some people like to be in front of the microphone, and some people really not so much. Mm-hmm. So, unfortunately for Bob, he's in my men's group and has been for a long time. And it was because of the stories we tell each other as men in our men's group that I asked Bob to come up, but he said no. So I persevered. I said, hey, I'll interview you, and then you don't have to prepare anything, and we can talk.
And you can't say no to Kerry.
Well, there's that too. I know some things about you, Bob, as you know. So. That's not a threat. That is not a threat. So the reason why I thought of Bob was because in our men's group, many of us have got lives that are very different from that of our fathers, and the roles that we have played have been very different. And Bob, in some ways, has had a bit of a different path in that regard. Would you say that you have got a sort of a similar setup in significant ways with your dad, as far as the kids and work?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a very loving family environment for the most part. I grew up here in West Vancouver. My father was I guess I'd describe him as an entrepreneurial businessman. He was a self-made person. And so I think I, like many people here, were going through this transition in society where, it was kind of expected that you would make a career and stay with one situation your entire career. And that's less of a situation nowadays. But he was a big influence on kind of me going into the world and earning an income. And my mother was very supportive. My mother was a homemaker, but she was always this stable force in our lives. And my father, created a situation where, because he was an entrepreneur, he was always doing his career and seldom around. And so my mother was sort of the stable force in our life. And so when it came time to for me to kind of enter the workforce, he was a big influence in terms of, making it known about what my options might be or this sort of thing. So it ended up that after looking at what his situation became, because there was some alcohol abuse as a result and all this sort of thing. Not abuse on me, but just he was abusing it. And so when that happened, we all kind of retreated as a family. But since then, or after that, I decided that I didn't want to follow that exact same path, although I did end up working over 40 years in retail management. But for the most part, for one company, and actually two companies, but the main one was the first one. So I guess in that respect, I was somewhat following his societal pattern, and which probably is not so much the case nowadays.
Can I ask you a question? What would success look like for you? Like, where do you feel most successful? Have you found?
Well, I think as mentioned here was because it's over, many decades now that that's changed over my life. And obviously when I became involved in management, career was a big thing, and success was measured there more about working your way up the ladder in an organization and what contributions you can make to the organization, and sort of those were the things that made me as a man feel like I was doing what I needed to do for my own sort of self-worth, you might say. But that changed over time to I guess putting it in categories that there was career, then there was marriage, and then there was children, and now grandchildren. So, having a 40-plus year relationship in marriage, which has been, the bread and butter of my life, and now the children, seeing them advance. This is what to me gives more meaning than what my career did in a way, because I strived, I think, to get a balance in my life and to get diversity in what I was involved with, and not just a career, not just any one thing, but I developed a real passion for nature and the outdoors, and this has been a theme in my life, and we have recreation property that we escape to, and I think that for me, the success for me has been watching our family grow in that environment. And my kids are all adults now, and they don't play video games, and they don't do a lot of the things that happen in society today, because we spent all our time in the country, and they learned how to chop wood, and were off grid, and learned how to be self-sufficient. And all of these traits, I think, were important to me, and result in my success, I think, in seeing them evolve into that.
Thanks, Bob. I'm going to tell one story on Bob. One of the lowlights of my parenting, one of my younger son got arrested at one of those big house parties. And the men's group was the next night. And I was trying to, one of my kids got arrested at one of those big house parties, and the men's group was the next night, and I was trying to figure out whether I was going to mention this, and was this awful, the start of a life of crime, or just a youthful indiscretion? And when we got to the meeting, Bob talked before me, and he said, "Hey, one of my kids got arrested last night." I just thought,
constable.
Thank you. Yeah, the same constable. Misery loves company. Bob, thank you so much. Yeah, good. You will never hear Bob speak again, I don't think. Thank you. And last but not least, Lindsay Hindle, one of our chaplains. Thank you so much for agreeing to come.
Thank you. Good morning. What makes a successful woman? My thinking around this has changed dramatically in the last 6 years as I've been through a very rich personal growth period, going to the edges of my abilities, my truth, and belief systems. So, the cultural context I was raised in, I think it's really important to point that out, and how my early beliefs about success may have been formed, and the period of life now where I have revised those beliefs to create my truth that I'm living today. I was born in 1982. Just a year earlier, Canada signed the UN General Assembly's Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Through the 80s and 90s, big things are happening. Females are graduating from university in higher numbers, and the idea of the working woman, the leading woman, is blooming. The World Wide Web is introduced into homes. There's a lot of excitement over technology. Computers and cell phones are the big new thing. Oprah rockets to stardom. Media and advertising in general are at an all-time peak with glossy images of power, money, beauty, and materialism. I graduate from high school in the class of year 2000, and everyone from parents to media made a big deal about us. I cannot understate how much we are groomed with a story of how exceptional we are, how much change we would make in the world, how much opportunity existed for us to grab hold of, and we were all destined to be leaders of the future. Through 2001 and 2010, the world becomes obsessed with younger and younger success stories. Tech startups rock the covers of magazines, renegade entrepreneurs achieve guru status, the business and wealth magazines create people-to-watch lists. They have top 40 under 40, then they come out with top 30 under 30, and then top 20 under 20. It's not surprising, given this context, that the story of success has scale and speed attached to it. Big, bold scale. And not surprisingly, the vehicle to get there is a ladder. And my job is to climb every rung as fast as possible, so I can be the one at the top, being the boss, wearing the pants, calling the shots, and living large with all the gloss. A damaging belief takes root. Success is something you are allowed to feel at the top of it all. And up until then, I'm just working to get there. Nothing else matters but there. So I make the connections, keep learning, bust my butt at my job on weekends, after hours, to prove myself and make the next rung on that ladder. Until suddenly, out of left field, I find myself with child, and everything I know gets turned upside down. This child is not part of the ladder. Children are not part of the glossy magazines I pay attention to. Children are not part of the valedictorian speech at university graduation. The scenario unfolding doesn't fit the story about success I've been consuming. Inevitably, painfully, I began to unlearn that story. I do the unthinkable. I throw away my university education and my career and decide to stay home with my child. That top position, that ladder with the 60 to 80-hour work weeks doesn't seem so glossy anymore. In fact, it barely resembles being humane. I get an education in humility. Success is not automatic, not predictable like it used to be. My beauty, my university education, my good manners, my skills do not matter to this baby. This baby wants everything I do not know I have within me yet. I began to learn what is truly valuable, a more humane marker of success: compassion, patience, problem solving, intuition, and love. Motherhood is messy for me. I break. Mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, I am crushed through a year of postpartum depression and anxiety. Crawling out of this darkness takes an education in compassion, patience, problem solving, intuition, and love. Love for myself that I've never given to myself before. Love for all the dark places, and love for all the light that eventually breaks open from within me as I am able to truly appreciate who I am, not where I am. Today, what I believe makes a successful woman is not getting there, but staying in love with our whole selves, here in the now, no matter what. In closing, I would like to share with you a poem I wrote, which has been selected in an amateur poetry writing contest, and it's slated for publishing in 2017 by the Poetry Institute of Canada.
Which you wrote.
Yes, I wrote it. The poem is titled, When She Unfolds Truth. Yes, we can be radiant and wretched, weathered, raw, wailing, renewed, rejoicing, and running away from or towards ourselves. All is held, all is unfolded. A woman of purpose is to be in any shape, way, or form and still love herself from the beginning until the very end. Thank you.
Oh.